What's up, guys? This is Kojo. Um, this is basically a demo of animation movement, player movement animation demo for Unity, Unity 4. This is mostly a reference for myself. It's a means for me to kind of walk through the process for myself, but maybe this might be of use to anybody else that's developing with Unity. So this is the scene that I have here. This is a level. This is a scene within Unity. The assets I got from um, the DT mobile development series. So I didn't create these assets, but I guess you can create assets through any 3D 3D applications such as Maya, 3ds Max, Cinema 4D, Modo, Lightwave, whatever one that's you're more comfortable with. I have friends that they actually use Blender, which is free. So this is the scene, this is the character, and the object of this process was to get the character to move within this 3D space. So this is like, let me show you the final product. So you see the character here, and it switches over from the scene view to the game view, and if I move, you see the character moves forward, backwards, strafe right, straight left, a wonky looking jump move, but you get the idea. Let's walk through the entire level. So yeah, this player in particular. So there's the level, and there's the player. The player has several components. Basically, this is the character. The player model that was imported into Unity. PFB player underscore player, and the main camera actually is attached to. You see over here, it's like this player in the hierarchy, and the children are the main camera, the PFB underscore player, and the point light. So basically, whenever the player moves, the camera moves with the player, and you see like the point light. It's just like I guess it's attached to, supposed to represent the light attached to the gun. And let me walk you through the process as far as getting that object to move. So there are several scripts. There was a movement script here. So I clicked on player. You see the inspector, just to transform character controller, player movement controller script. So let me remove that script. Let me see. Remove that component. Start from ground zero. The animation script is attached to the model. I'll explain why. So you see here, let me remove that component. So if you remove so I had like a movement script, which was made in JavaScript, and I had also a animation script, which is made in JavaScript as well. So if you remove it and you press play, if I press left, right, nothing happens. Press space to jump, nothing happens. We go to the game scene. So let me explain the script. So let's start with the movement script that I attached. So let me show you. If I attach the movement script here, you attach it to the player. So all these objects move with you, and you see to the right. So you see JS player movement underscore controller. That means this is a JavaScript being used. You can also use a C#. So if you right click, create. So you have an option of the different kinds of scripts you could use. You could either use JavaScript, you could use a C# script, or you could use a Boo script. I don't know if anybody uses a Boo script, but I've used C# scripts in the past. I just wanted to use a JavaScript this time around. So this is a JavaScript. So let's say if I create a new JavaScript here, shows up here. Oh, let me take that off. Not there. Delete that. Have like a scripts folder. Let me go here, create JavaScript. You see new behavior.script. So you see this is like basically the skeleton. So JavaScript new behavior script. Information in that script is located here in the inspector, pragma script. It's a start function and an update function. So if you expand it out, you see JS, JavaScript. If you want to do a C# script, shows up here, and it's a little bit different. You have to call the Unity engine, using Unity engine and systems collections, and you actually have to reference back to the mono behavior to get it to work. But you see the same thing here, initialization, it's a start function, update function, and you see like the icon C# script. So let me delete those. Get right into it. Delete. Yeah, delete. So if you create a script, like and you see the information over here, if you want to edit it, you double click it. You can either double click it here, or I have it attached to the player. So you see over here, player movement controller, the script here. You double click it here, it opens it in mono development. So several things here you see over here. First, I declared several variables. Several variables: speed, jump speed, gravity, private variable called move direction. And you notice how there's public for these variables, private for these variables. Actually, by default, any of the variable you declare in JavaScript and Unity it's by default it's considered to be public. So I can actually take that out. I just put that in there because working in C#, I think by default the variables are private, so you have to declare something as public. So it's just kind of a habit, because when you're working in Unity, there are times in which you'll be working with both JavaScript or C# script, or if you're working in a team, somebody may feel more comfortable working in C#, or so it's good to understand both. So I always put public, just so I'll know, because public variables are variables that are editable within the inspector. So if you see to the right over here, the script, so you see all these are public variables: speed, jump speed, gravity. So over here in the inspector for the player movement script attached to the player, you see, so if I'm playing, I can actually adjust the speed. So it's set by default, it's set to 10, because that's how I have it in the script. I can change it to 8, change it to whatever, 800. But even if I make these changes while I'm playing, it does not make those changes within the script. So you can use it to test things around as far as like the movement, to get the movement the way you want it to be. So let me reset. It resets it back to the default. So let me go back. So you see 6.820 over here, and you notice here have this private variable, move direction. You don't, since you set something to private, you have no access to it in the inspector. So in JavaScript, you have to actually, since it's by default the variables are public, you have to explicitly say that it's private. It's the other way around in C#. It's private by default, so you just have to, so if you do it in C# and you don't put the private attached to the variable, it's going to recognize it as private anyway. So let's say I take the private off, save it, and close it out. And you see here now, before it wasn't there. See, now you see move direction, and now it's editable. And since, like you see here, like these are variables. This is a flow variable. This is another flow variable. This one actually it's connected to a vector3, so it's basically a vector3 variable, move direction, and it's set to vector3.0, which is shorthand for vector3 0, 0, 0, 0 on the x, 0 on the y, 0 on the z. And another cool thing about Unity is that if you're not familiar with any particular like function or variable or methods within Unity, like let's say I don't know anything about vector3 or vector3 0, you put the cursor over that element, and on Mac, I'm not sure about PC, maybe it might be control, but in Mac you do command apostrophe. You click those two together, and it goes straight into the scripting reference library in Unity. So you see here, vector3, what it does, it's shorthand for vector3 0, 0, 0, 0. So if I did this instead, if I put vector3 0, 0, 0, it's the same thing. So have these variables. It's the function start, But what I want is some movement that movement that happens with every frame, when every frame is being updated. So this is an update function. So the first thing that I started with was a variable, a controller variable, which takes this information from the character controller. It's a character controller variable called controller, and you have this thing called get component. So basically, with the get component, it brings all the information from the player here. So the player here already has attributed to it a character controller. So it takes information from the character controller and brings it into the update function. So you get access to the character controller or the player in this function. And the next aspect of the script is the an if statement. So if the controller, as you see over here, if the controller is grounded, meaning if the player is touching the ground, colliding with the ground, you have control over the move direction variable, which is a vector 3. So vector 3 has vector 3 has 3 parameters: the x, y, and the z. So for the x, you have something called input get axis horizontal, and the y is set to 0, and the input get axis vertical for the z is set to vertical. So this is you need this in order to be able to control the player input. So you see over here, like, again, if you don't know what that is, the input, you can do command apostrophe and all the information as far as the input call, its method, and you have the option of, you see, this is like an example here. If you're working in JavaScript, you can use it you can work within JavaScript. But if you want to see the same example in C#, you can. If you want to see it in BoostScript, you can. But for this example, I'm using JavaScript. And another thing is, like, where exactly do you see? You noticed here that in parentheses it's referencing horizontal, referencing vertical. So what exactly does that mean? So in Unity, they have a number of inputs. So if you go to Unity, Edit, Project Settings, you'll see Input. And to the right in the inspector, you see axis. I don't know how to talk today. But you see different axes. So you see one for horizontal, vertical, fire, fire. So all of these are inputs that you can use for whatever objects or characters within Unity. See one for jump. So you notice how I referenced in mono-develop horizontal. So you need to put that in parentheses. When you reference that horizontal within Unity, you see over here, I click on horizontal, you get access to these inputs. So the main inputs are left, right, which is the left arrow, right arrow on your keyboard. The alternate keys you could use are the A or the D. And also I referenced, you see here, I referenced the vertical. It's another vertical input. So you see input, get axis. These are all axes. So you have to do input.getAxis, then the axis you want to reference. So vertical, here you see the, the vertical, you have like a negative button, a positive button. So basically it's the up and the down. And let me see. Oh, that's the wrong one. This is the vertical I meant to reference. So you see, like, it's referencing the down, the up. The alternate ones are the S, the W keys on your keyboard. And I also wanted to get jump. So this one, jump, and jump here. In order to get that to work, you press the space bar on your keyboard. So all I'm doing is referencing those inputs. So here you see the horizontal, here the vertical, here. So basically the X is affected by the left, right. Nothing happens on the Y. The input is affected by the vertical, the up, down. That affects the Z axis, just for like the strafing left and right. And you see here input get button jump. and the move direction Y. So basically, it's here I got set to 0, but here now it's like the jump is referencing the Y component of the vector. Move direction dot Y equals jump speed. With jump speed, I had it set to 8. So if you're playing Unity and you want to edit the speed is too slow or too fast, you can edit it within the inspector while you're playing in Unity. And so you have that. And also another thing for the move direction is like you need a transform and transform direction, and it basically is referencing the move direction variable. So you need this to move. So like you can go into the details as far as the referencing, like forget command apostrophe, and it transforms the direction for local space to world space, and so you need that in order to move. And then also the speed. So you have control of the speed. So you see here I have speed, and speed is actually here is actually a variable, a floating float variable that was set to 6. So the move direction and the speed, you can dictate how fast you want it to be within the inspector. So if it's too fast, too slow, you can change it within the inspector. So it's move direction times equals speed. And then I always talked about the input jump. And also this was added later on because initially without this, when this wasn't here for the applied gravity to the player, the player wasn't actually touching the ground, so it wasn't working. So if the player's not touching the ground, this if statement was not going to work. So you're not going to be able to move the object, the player. So this was put in there. Move direction. This is referencing the Y component of the vector 3 component of the move direction. Minus equals gravity, which was set to in the variables. Gravity was set to 20 times that delta time. So what's that? Command apostrophe time that delta time you see here. So when you're playing a game, you don't. Let's say you have a very fast computer and and you're playing a game. If you don't have the time delta time attributed to the movement is going to be based upon the frames per second. And let's say you have a slow computer and it can't really output that many frames per second, then you're gonna feel the difference in the movement. It's gonna slow down. So you put the time, that delta time, to make it basically you say over here, use the function to make your game frame independent. So it doesn't matter how many frames. So like the game's moving 60 frames per second, or your computer moving 30 frames per second. It does not matter. It's just it means it moves. Moves. Is no frames are involved. It just moves per second. So like the movement is dictated just by the second. So I'm not sure if I explained it. I did justice to the explanation, but you want to have this time set in there because you don't know, whenever somebody's playing your game, you don't know what kind of hardware that they're using. So if the hardware is not, it's an older computer, it doesn't really matter. They can play no matter what. The movement will be consistent per second. So you put that in there, attributed to the gravity. And also over here, referencing the controller again, move direction, and the same thing, time delta time, like the movement, the left, right, strafe left. Just make sure like the movement of the player is consistent no matter what hardware that you're using. So for this script, okay, you save it. There's the player here. So I put that script onto this player. So like, let me see, let me remove it, show you how to do it again. You get script, you put it on the player. So the movement script will affect the player as well as the camera, as well as the point light that's attached to it. It seems to be attached to the gun. So if I just press play, you see the following. It moves, the character moves. Right, left, press the space bar, jumps, strike left, strike right. What you notice, like the character is very static. There's no movement as far as there's no animation as far as the character. So the movement is there as far as moving within the 3D space, but there's no animation of the character. So in order to do that, a separate script was made, an animation script. And before I put that script onto the player, let's look at it. So you click on it over here in the assets. I have the script. It's a JavaScript. Animation controller. You see to the right in the inspector. This is the actual script. But if you want to edit it, you go into Mono Develop. Double click on it. So you see here, I have a number of I have an if else if statement. So one thing, you know what, before I start that, let's look. So the character that was imported, you go to import assets, was actually animated. So the way it works is that, let's say you have a character and you have it in a 3D package such as Maya, Cinema 4D, Lightwave, Moto, whatever it may be. And let's say it's kind of like you know how you have a sprite sheet, you have all the movements of that character on a sprite sheet. So basically with 3D character, you have one long clip that has all the animation movement. So let's say, I don't know, from frame 0 to 48, it has the character animated as idle. 49 to 100, it shows the character running. From frame 101 to 150, character jumping. So you have all these clips stacked together in an animation, then you import it into Unity. So let's find the actual model. So you go to the model, and you see here it was imported as an FBX. Click on the model, you see to the lower right, it's a preview of the character. You can like rotate it, look at it. When you look at the character, you have a number of attributes in the inspector, the model. If you look all the way down here, you see a field called animation, and you see over here, like I mentioned, like the different kinds of animations attributed to the character. So it seems like it started off, the first animation is the character when idle, second animation is when the character is running forward, running backwards, straight from right, straight from left, and there's also a death animation. And you can also go, let me see, go to animations field here, and it tells you, like, if you click on idle, it tells you the full animation is, let me see. So you see, like, this is the start of the full animation of the character. The full animation is 218, I think, frames long, 24 frames per second. So you click over here. Frame 1 to 51 is the idle movement. 52, 72 is running forward, running backwards, straight right, straight left, and it ends with the death. So you see how it changes. Like, this is like the full animation of the character that was imported. So when you go into making a script, what you need to do is, let me make this a little bit smaller. So going back to the inputs, inputs that I mentioned in here. Let me see, edit, project settings, inputs. Like you saw here, AD, left, right, all these inputs. Based upon those inputs, you go to Mono Develop and you create a script where if input.getKey, and again, if you don't know what getKey is, just highlight it, command apostrophe, it'll give you, like, in JavaScript, C#, etc., like how to use that function. So getKey D or input getKey right. And when you do that, you have to use the animation. You have to use like the animation here. It's like it's another. Yeah, you have to access animation. It's another scripting element in Unity. So you reference animation, animation, play, run forward. And the reason why you know the term, you have to go back to the model. You see how the model has different terms. Run forward. These were like named prior to being imported within Unity. So in order to run, so basically run forward, you reference the run forward clip. Else if that's not the case, if you press A or left, animation play run backwards, so you reference the run backward clip. Else if, W, up, play, strafe left, reference that, strafe right. If none of these are being pressed, none of these keys are being pressed, else animation crossfade idle. So you may think, well, why don't you just put animation.play that, in parentheses, quotation mark, idle. Well, you could do that, but when you're playing the game, whenever you press right and you take the key off the right key, it's just a jerky move. The movement is a bit jerky. It's not smooth. So when you use crossfade, go back to crossfade, command, apostrophe, animation.crossfade, it goes to the reference. So it says, the description, fades the animation with the name animation over a period of time and fades other animations out. So basically, the crossfade smooths out the animation, smooths out the movement. So when it transitions from right to idle, it's a smooth transition. Up, smooth transition. So you want to put the crossfade in as like the default if none of these buttons are being pressed. So once that is saved, close this out. Close it. Once that is saved, let's go back to the script. So let's close that out. Import assets, go to scripts, movement scripts. And you may think, okay, once you're done with the animation controller script, you drop it onto the player. Well, that's not the case. For the movement script, you wanted the movement to affect the main camera, the movement of the camera, the player, and the point light. But in order to use the animation has to be attributed to the actual player that has the animations to it. And in this case, the FB underscore player is the object within the hierarchy that has the animations attributed to it. So don't drop it on the player, you drop it on the animated object. So let's go back to the scripts, animation controller, and you drop it on the FB player. So if you click on the FB player, you see now it has attached to it the player animation controller JavaScript. And if you press play now, so now you have in the overall player, you have the player movement controller script and the player object with the animation. So you have the animation controller script. So if you press play, you press right, two things are happening. The movement script is being called, so the character is moving right, and also the run forward clip is being called in the animation script. If I let go, crossfade into the idle, move left, moves backwards, movement script is moving left, the animation script is calling the run backwards clip within the animation of the character. You do jump, the jump is kind of wonky, nothing's happening because no animation was made to show like the knees bending, so it does this, but it transitions into idle. Strafe right, strafe left. So let's go through the entire scene. Walk, walk, walk. Bam, there you have it. So again, there are probably a lot of Unity pros out there that it's just like nothing to them, but for me, it's just for me to keep it as like a mental record of the steps that were taken in order to get a player to move within a scene, a level, as well as to have the animations attached to this 3D object actually, get called with various inputs within Unity. So this may be of help to somebody else that's working with Unity. If you have any questions, let me know. Send me a message, and that should be about it.